Welcome to TB Dahl Audiobooks. Before the story begins, please take a quick second to subscribe and leave a comment below. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, enjoy the listen.
Undisclosed Background by T.B. Dahl. Chapter 6. The Stolen Names. They walked north through Slottsparken in the gray half-light, three abreast on the gravel path, close enough for quiet speech, but spaced like strangers sharing a morning constitutional. The palace sat dark and heavy to their right. Riley kept her eyes forward. A jogger passed going south, headphones in, blind to everything but the path. Katarina led them to the far edge of the park, where Wergelandsveien met the residential streets beyond. She stopped beneath an old elm, whose canopy still held the night's moisture. The car is on Svensensgate, a grey Volvo, older model. The registration is clean. It belongs to no one connected to any name you know. Who arranged it? Elliot's eyes moved across the street, cataloging parked vehicles, windows with lights, a delivery van idling near a corner shop. I did, 3 days ago. Katarina adjusted the document case strap across her shoulder. When Henrik did not answer his phone for the second consecutive evening, I assumed the worst and prepared accordingly. Riley processed that. 3 days. Katarina had been building exit routes while Riley and Elliot were still comparing envelopes and deciding whether to trust each other. How many safe houses does the Northern Table maintain? Fewer than we need. More than you should know about in a single conversation. They crossed the street. Svensensgate was quiet, residential, lined with older apartment buildings and a few parked cars. The Volvo sat midway down the block, unremarkable in every dimension. Dark gray paint gone chalky around the wheel arches, a small scratch on the rear bumper. Nothing anyone would remember. Katarina unlocked it with a physical key, no remote fob. Elliot took the driver's seat without asking. Katarina didn't object. She settled in the back with the document case on her lap. Riley took the passenger side. The engine turned over on the first try. Elliot pulled out slowly, no headlights until they reached the main road, then eased into the sparse early traffic heading north. Stay off the E6 until we're past Lillestrøm, Katarina said. Take Trondheimsveien through Grorud, then turn onto the county roads at Skedsmokorset. How far? 90 minutes if we keep to secondary roads, longer if something looks wrong. Riley watched the city slide past. Grünerløkka, Sinsen, Storo. The neighborhoods she'd lived in, run through, eaten breakfast in, built her entire adult geography around. They passed within 4 blocks of her apartment on Toftes Gate. She didn't turn her head. Phones, Katarina said. Riley looked at her. Every phone used during the night must be destroyed. Not switched off, not reset. Destroyed. Elliot glanced in the rear-view mirror. The prepaid, too? Especially the prepaid. It received an inbound message that connects you to Parkveien. If that number is compromised, the message history becomes a map. Riley pulled the prepaid from her jacket pocket. It was a cheap Nokia, the kind sold at Narvesen kiosks. She'd had it for less than 12 hours. Already it felt like evidence. My personal phone is at the apartment. Good. Leave it there. If someone tracks it, it tells them you went home. That buys time. Elliot reached into his jacket with one hand while steering with the other. He produced his own prepaid and a second phone, a work device, older model. I brought this from the construction site yesterday. It has my schedule on it, crew contacts. Destroy it. It has nothing on it that connects. It connects to cell towers. It has an IMEI. It can be triangulated against the towers near Parkveien between midnight and 5 a.m. Katharina's voice was patient, the way a teacher explains something she's explained before. If FSB or their contractors are running signals intelligence through a cooperative node, and they will be, any device active near our location during that window is a beacon. Elliot said nothing. He placed both phones on the center console. They drove through Grurud as the sky brightened to the color of old pewter. Traffic was still thin. Delivery vans, early commuters, a school bus pulling into a lot. Riley watched the rearview mirror. No single vehicle held position behind them for more than 3 turns. Past Skedsmokorset, Elliot turned onto a county road that ran northeast through farmland and patchy forest. The asphalt narrowed. Suburban houses gave way to wooden fences, hay bales wrapped in white plastic, birch stands, and long views across fields still brown from winter. Katharina directed him to stop at a gravel pullout beside a farm equipment shed. A metal barrel stood near the shed's entrance, half filled with ash from recent burning. Agricultural waste, probably. No one would question fresh ash in a barrel on a farm road in April. Elliot killed the engine. He took the 3 phones, removed the back covers, and pried out the batteries with his thumb and the edge of a coin. The prepaid Nokias gave up their batteries easily. The work phone resisted until Elliot used the bolt cutters from his bag, pressing the flat of the blade against the casing until it cracked. He separated the SIM cards, snapped each one between his fingers, and dropped the fragments into the barrel. Riley found a box of storm matches in the Volvo's glove compartment. The first match caught the SIM card fragments, which curled and blackened. Elliot added the phone casings. The plastic burned with an acrid chemical smell. He broke the circuit boards across his knee and fed the pieces in. The batteries he placed on a flat stone and struck with the bolt cutters until the lithium cells ruptured and hissed. The whole process took 8 minutes. When it was done, the barrel held a small mound of melted plastic, scorched metal, and circuit board fragments that no forensic team could reassemble into anything useful. Riley watched the smoke rise thin and gray into the morning air and thought about how quickly a person could become untraceable, or how quickly a person could become someone with no way to call for help. Elliot pushed the debris deeper into the ash with a stick, covered it, and returned to the car without speaking. They drove on. The safe house sat at the end of a gravel track that branched off a county road 7 kilometers past the last village. Birch and pine pressed in from both sides as the track climbed a gentle slope. The trees were dense enough that Riley lost sight of the main road after the first bend. The house itself was small, single-story, built from dark-stained timber with a pitched roof and a covered porch. It looked like 1,000 other Norwegian country houses, a hytte expanded into year-round use, or a small holding whose land had been sold off decades ago. The windows were shuttered. A woodshed stood to the left, a smaller outbuilding to the right. Beyond the clearing, the forest continued unbroken toward a ridge that blocked the northern horizon. "Leave the car behind the woodshed," Katharina said. "It shouldn't be visible from the track." Elliot parked where she indicated. He sat for a moment after cutting the engine, scanning the tree line, the outbuildings, the approaches. Then he opened the door and stepped out. The air smelled different here. Pine resin, wet earth, wood smoke residue from the chimney, and the faint mineral tang of a stream somewhere nearby. No traffic, no city hum, only wind moving through the upper canopy and a bird calling from the ridge. Katharina unlocked the front door with a key she pulled from a zippered pocket inside the document case. The lock was heavy, old-fashioned, and the door was solid wood reinforced with an interior steel plate that Riley noticed when it swung open. Inside, the house was cool and dim. Katharina moved through the rooms, switching on lamps. The main space combined a kitchen area, a table large enough for 6, and a sitting area with 2 worn armchairs and a wood-burning stove. The walls were pine-paneled and bare except for 2 topographic maps, one of the surrounding region, one of southern Norway, pinned directly to the wood. A short hallway led to 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a utility room. Everything was clean, functional, and stripped of personality. No photographs, no decorations, no books on the shelves except a tide table, a field guide to edible plants, and a first aid manual in Norwegian and Russian. Riley set her bag on the kitchen table and watched Katarina open a series of cupboards with practiced efficiency. Tinned food, fish, beans, tomatoes, crackers, dried pasta and rice, powdered milk, coffee. A medical kit with bandages, antiseptic, ibuprofen, a suture kit, and what looked like broad-spectrum antibiotics in blister packs. Below the counter, batteries, candles, a wind-up radio, a box of paper maps, and 3 envelopes of cash. Norwegian kroner, Swedish kroner, euros. In the utility room, Katarina pulled a trunk from under a shelf. Inside, men's and women's clothing in neutral colors, various sizes, waterproof jackets, hiking boots, wool base layers, a set of binoculars, and a compass. "This was stocked in January," Katarina said. "Henrik insisted on a quarterly rotation." Henrik Rask. The dead man in the museum basement had stood in this kitchen, counted tins, folded clothing, and prepared for the possibility that 2 people he'd helped orphan would one day need to hide in the Norwegian forest. Riley sat down at the table and opened the document case. Elliot had already disappeared outside. Through the kitchen window, she watched him walk the perimeter of the clearing, testing the woodshed door, checking the outbuilding, which appeared to be a root cellar with a heavy lock, examining the ground near the track entrance for tire marks or footprints. He moved along the tree line with the unhurried focus of someone assessing a site for structural integrity, except the structure he was evaluating was tactical. He came back inside 12 minutes later and leaned against the kitchen door frame. One access road. The track dead ends about 200 meters past the house at a collapsed fence line. Forest beyond that, dense enough to slow vehicles but passable on foot. The woodshed has tools. The root cellar has a second exit, a hatch covered by brush on the north side, probably an old drainage channel widened and reinforced. Whoever built this place wanted a back way out. "Henrik," Katarina said. "The ridge gives a line of sight to the track entrance if you climb about 50 meters into the trees. I marked a position. If anyone approaches by road, we'd have 3 to 4 minutes warning, depending on speed." Katarina nodded, as if this was exactly the report she expected. Riley spread the documents from the case across the table. Katarina had grabbed what she could from the Parkveien flat: 2 folders of printed correspondence, a hand-drawn organizational chart with initials instead of names, a set of typed meeting minutes in Russian with Norwegian annotations in the margins, a sealed envelope labeled NT-F17/B in Henrik Rask's careful handwriting, and the photograph. The photograph of 2 infants under a knitted blanket, initials on the back: S.A.N. and M.H.N. Riley placed the photograph to one side. She would return to it. Not yet. She opened the sealed envelope first. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper. At the top, handwritten in ink, "For R and E, if I cannot speak." Below that, 4 paragraphs of tight, careful handwriting. "The claim is not legal. No court will crown you. No parliament will recognize you. That is not the danger, and it is not the point. The danger is symbolic. You descend through a concealed line from Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich, the last person named in the chain of imperial succession when Nicholas II abdicated in 1917. Your bloodline does not give you a throne. It gives you a story. And stories, in Russia, have overthrown more governments than armies. File 17 contains the evidence: baptismal records, letters, travel documents, witness statements, genetic comparisons. The evidence is fragmented across multiple custodians for security. The custodian index, which maps where each piece is held, was stolen from my apartment. Whoever holds it can now locate every piece or destroy every piece. Do not let them tell you what this means. Not the keepers, not the restorationists, not the FSB. Decide for yourselves what the truth is worth and who deserves to hear it. That is the only freedom I failed to give you. I am sorry it took me this long to try. The letter was signed H.R. Riley read it twice. The second time, the words blurred, and she pressed her thumb and forefinger against the bridge of her nose until the pressure behind her eyes receded. Elliot read it over her shoulder. He straightened up slowly. He knew he was going to die. He knew it was possible. Katerina stood at the counter, making coffee with the stovetop percolator, her back to them. Henrik had been frightened for months. He told me in January that the custodian index was the keystone. If it fell, everything fell. And it fell. It was sold by someone inside honest Russia. Henrik believed it was Pavel Orlov. Riley looked up. Who is Pavel Orlov? Opportunist faction. A broker. He manages money for several émigré families and has contacts in private intelligence circles. Henrik suspected Orlov had been providing information to Russian-linked intermediaries for at least 2 years, but he could not prove it without exposing the index itself. So the man who was supposed to guard the map sold the map.
Katerina poured coffee into 3 ceramic mugs and brought them to the table. Honest Russia has survived for more than a century by dividing knowledge. No single person holds all the proof. That system works until someone sells the key to the divisions. Riley wrapped her hands around the mug. The ceramic was warm. The coffee was strong and black. Small comforts in a house built for emergencies. Katerina, the letter says genetic comparisons, DNA evidence. Yes. Whose DNA? Compared to what? Your mother provided samples when you were infants. They were compared against reference material held by the custodians, material connected to known Romanov line descendants through verified genealogical records. And the results? Consistent with descent from the Romanov family through the line of Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich. Elliot pulled out a chair and sat down across from Riley. Consistent is not the same as proven. No, but combined with the documentary evidence, baptismal records, letters, travel documents, the cross you recovered from Henrik's apartment, the case is strong enough to be politically dangerous. That is the threshold that matters, not scientific certainty, political credibility. Riley turned back to the organizational chart Katerina had brought. Initials connected by lines, some solid, some dashed. She recognized the structure from intelligence briefings she'd prepared at Ericsson and Lindgren. Network diagrams used to map insurgent cells, financial flows, influence operations. This is Honest Russia's internal structure. A simplified version. Henrik drew it for me 2 months ago when he was trying to convince me the organization could no longer protect you. Riley studied the chart. At the center, a box labeled TW, the Table of Witnesses. 7 lines radiated outward to circles marked with single letters. Some circles connected to smaller nodes. One circle, at the bottom, was drawn in heavier ink and marked with a question mark. The question mark. That represents whoever sold the custodian index. Henrik suspected Orlov, but he was not certain whether Orlov acted alone or on behalf of a faction. Elliot leaned forward. How many people inside Honest Russia know our real names? The full table of witnesses. Perhaps 12 to 15 others across the Keeper and Custodian networks. More know the file designation, File 17, without knowing the subjects' identities. And now, whoever has the Custodian Index knows. Yes. The word sat in the room like something physical. Riley turned to the laptop-sized wind-up radio on the counter. Does that get Norwegian news stations? Katarina reached over and turned the hand crank. The radio wheezed, then caught. She dialed through static until NRK's morning broadcast filled the kitchen. A financial report, weather for eastern Norway, then a brief segment on a construction accident in Bergen. Riley listened for 5 minutes. Nothing about the National Museum. Nothing about Henrik Rask. It's early, Elliot said. Give it time. It didn't take long. At 10:47, Riley found it. She was reading through the typed meeting minutes, dense, bureaucratic Russian that she translated haltingly with the help of Katarina's marginal notes, when Elliot called her name from the sitting area. He'd powered the wind-up radio and caught the tail end of an NRK news update. He cranked the radio again, and they waited through a repeat cycle. The item ran fourth in the bulletin, after parliamentary budget negotiations, a NATO exercise update, and a ferry service disruption in Nordland. Oslo police have issued a request for 2 individuals to contact investigators in connection with the death of Henrik Rask, whose body was discovered at the National Museum earlier this week. Police describe the individuals as witnesses who provided initial statements but departed before further questioning could be completed. Detective Inspector Karin Nordahl of Oslo Police District is leading the inquiry. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Police Operations Center. The bulletin moved on to sports. Riley stood motionless beside the radio. The phrasing echoed in her head. Departed before further questioning could be completed. Not left. Not went home. Departed. As if they'd slipped away. As if departure implied guilt. We were released, she said. We gave statements. We were told we could leave. That's not what the bulletin says. Because the bulletin is wrong. The bulletin is shaped. Elliot switched the radio off. Someone fed that language to NRK, or to whichever journalist covers police beats. Departed before further questioning isn't neutral. It makes us sound like we ran. Katarina sat at the table, her hands flat on the surface. Do either of your names appear? Not in the radio bulletin. Check online. They had no phones, no laptop. The safe house had no internet connection. That was part of its design. But the radio could receive digital text broadcasts on certain frequencies, and Katarina showed Riley how to tune to NRK's text service. The scrolling text confirmed the radio story and added a detail. 2 persons, a man and a woman, both Norwegian nationals in their late 20s, are sought as material witnesses. Police emphasize they are not suspects at this time, but stress the importance of completing witness interviews. Not suspects at this time.
Riley had written enough political risk assessments to recognize the construction. The phrase existed to provide legal cover while planting the opposite impression. Readers didn't hear "not suspects." They heard "persons of interest." They heard evasion. They heard, "What are they hiding?" "Our names aren't there yet," she said. "But the description narrows it to us. Anyone who knows we were at the museum that night, the officers who took our statements, the duty sergeant, anyone in the system, can connect this." "Your employers," Elliot said. Riley's stomach dropped. Erickson and Lindgren, her security clearance. The clients she briefed, government ministries, defense contractors, NATO-aligned organizations. A material witness notice in a murder investigation would trigger an immediate review. Even without formal charges, her access would be suspended. Her credibility, the precise, analytical, carefully constructed professional credibility she'd spent 5 years building, would begin to dissolve. "Your construction company," she said, looking at Elliot. He nodded. His jaw was tight. "They'll try to find us through our workplaces," Riley said. "Through our landlords. Through anyone whose name appears on a lease, a pay stub, an emergency contact form." Tara. The name landed hard. Tara helped me leave the Munch Museum. If anyone reviews security footage and identifies her, then she becomes a person of interest too. Riley moved to the window. The forest stood green and indifferent beyond the clearing. A light rain had begun, dotting the glass. "I need to warn her." "With what?" Elliot spread his hands. "We burned every phone. There's no landline. The nearest village is 7 kilometers away, and we don't know if it's safe to show our faces." Katerina spoke. "Tara Morgan is already at risk. But contacting her now, before we understand the full scope of the operation against you, could make her situation worse. If her phone is monitored, any incoming call from an unknown number near this region gives them a geographic reference. So we do nothing. We do something more important than a phone call. We understand what we are facing." Riley turned from the window. "Then explain it. Now. All of it." Oslo Police District confirm that the 2 material witnesses in the Henrik Rask case have not responded to requests for contact. Investigators are exploring all avenues to locate the individuals. The case remains under active investigation. Have not responded to requests for contact. As though invitations had been sent and politely ignored. As though Riley and Elliot were sitting in their apartments reading police messages and choosing silence. "They're building a timeline," Elliot said. "First report, witnesses left early. Second report, witnesses haven't responded. Third report will say witnesses are actively evading. Each step makes us look worse. And each step gives whoever is pushing this another news cycle to work with." Riley sat back down at the table and arranged the documents in front of her. She needed to think like an analyst, not a target. Karen Nordahl released us. She had our statements, our contact details, our cooperation. There was no instruction to remain available for further questioning. At least nothing beyond the standard expectation. For this kind of escalation to happen in less than 48 hours, someone inside or adjacent to the investigation is applying pressure. Katerina refilled her coffee mug. "Detective Inspector Nordahl may not be the one driving this." "PST?" The Norwegian Police Security Service. Riley had briefed clients on their counterintelligence capabilities. "Possibly. Or pressure applied through channels PST would respond to. A diplomatic note,
a security briefing, an intelligence sharing request from a foreign partner that mentions your names in a context that makes Norwegian authorities nervous. You're saying Russia.
I am saying that the Federal Security Service has spent decades perfecting the art of making other countries' institutions do its work. They don't need to send agents into Norwegian police stations. They need to send information, carefully selected, carefully framed, to the right desk at the right moment. Elliot leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You're describing an influence operation. I am describing what the FSB calls containment. Their goal is not to arrest you. They have no jurisdiction. Their goal is to make you unavailable. To institutions, to media, to anyone who might listen to what you have to say. Riley looked at the organizational chart, then at Henrik Rask's letter, then at the photograph of 2 infants she didn't remember being. Katerina, you said last night that Russian state intelligence obtained the custodian index. You mentioned the FSB. How much do you actually know about their operation? Katerina sat down. She placed her hands on the table, a deliberate gesture, Riley noticed, as though presenting herself for examination. Henrik received intelligence from a source inside one of the émigré networks that Honest Russia monitors. The source indicated that a senior FSB officer had been assigned to a deniable operation focused on File 17 and its protected subjects. The operation has a name. She paused. The operation is called Quiet Crown. The words had the weight of a classification stamp. Riley felt them land in her chest, not with the sharp shock of the museum basement or the sick vertigo of learning she had a brother, but with something colder, institutional. A government had named an operation after the silence they intended to impose on her existence. What do you know about the officer? His name is Colonel Sergei Antonovich Volkov, Senior FSB Counterintelligence. He specializes in émigré networks, opposition movements, and what the service calls historical symbolic threats. Historical symbolic threats, Riley repeated. Bloodlines, symbols, martyrs. Stories that give opposition movements something to gather around. Volkov's career has been built on identifying those threats before they become operational. He monitors monarchist organizations, exile networks, archival projects, DNA genealogy research, anything that could produce a narrative the current regime cannot control. And now he's monitoring us. He is doing more than monitoring. If Operation Quiet Crown is active, he is running a layered campaign. Intelligence collection, asset recruitment, media manipulation, diplomatic pressure, document seizure, and, if necessary, direct action. Elliot pushed off the wall. Direct action meaning what happened to Henrik Rask. Katerina's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. A flicker of grief compressed into stillness. Henrik was killed by a professional. The method was designed to avoid a state signature. Volkov would not have been present. He would have authorized the interception through intermediaries, private contractors, criminal proxies, someone deniable. His instruction would have been simple: prevent disclosure, confirm the descendants, recover the custodians. Leave nothing traceable. And the murder was also a trap, Riley said. To see if we'd come. To see if we were real. Yes. Henrik's death served multiple purposes. Silence the witness. Confirm the targets. Create a crime scene that draws Norwegian police attention and makes the two of you visible to the system. Riley stood and walked to the topographic map pinned to the wall. She traced the county roads with her finger, not really seeing them, letting her mind work.
So Volkov now has the custodian index, which tells him where every piece of File 17 is held. He has confirmation that we exist and that we responded to Henrik's summons. He has us flagged in the Norwegian police system as uncooperative witnesses. And he's running media pressure to make us look evasive before we can tell anyone what actually happened. Yes. What does he not have? Katerina considered. He does not have you. He does not have the physical evidence you recovered from Henrik's apartment. The cross, the Brasovo book, the correspondence. He does not have the letter Henrik left for you in the sealed envelope. And he does not yet have all of File 17. The custodian index tells him where to look, but retrieving fragmented evidence from multiple custodians across several countries takes time, especially if the custodians have been warned. Have they been warned? Some, not all. Henrik began contacting custodians before he died, but he was cautious. He used old protocols, physical mail, coded messages, trusted intermediaries, slow methods. He did not have time to reach everyone.
So it's a race, Elliot said. Volkov is using the index to collect the proof. We need to reach the custodians before he does. Or reach the proof through another path. Katerina opened one of the folders and removed a sheet of paper covered in Henrik's handwriting. Henrik did not keep a copy of the custodian index, but he knew the system. He designed parts of it. Before he died, he wrote this. She placed the paper on the table. Riley sat back down and leaned over it. The page contained a list of 6 locations, each followed by a coded reference and a single word or phrase. 1. Helsinki, F/1919, Foundation 2. Stockholm, NW/Cross, Passage 3. Oslo, NT/B-4, Witness 4. Paris, EP/Letters, Mother 5. London, MW/Trust, Banker 6. Porvoo, AM/Baptism, Beginning. These are the 6 primary fragments of File 17, Katerina said. Each represents a location, a custodian reference, and a category of evidence. Together, they form the complete proof, documentary, material, and genetic, that connects your bloodline to Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich. Riley scanned the list. Helsinki, Stockholm, Oslo, Paris, London, Porvoo. 6 cities, 6 custodians, 6 pieces of a truth that had been divided to survive and was now being hunted to be destroyed. Oslo, she said. NT/B4. That was on the note beside Henrik's body. Northern Table, B4. Brasovo. Henrik was the Oslo custodian. His piece included the cross, the correspondence, and part of the documentary record. Most of that is now in your possession, or was destroyed when his apartment was searched. And Porvoo, AM/Baptism. The baptismal record, the single most important document. It names the concealed child and connects him to Michael Alexandrovich. It's held by a custodian in Porvoo, Finland, an old town, Orthodox church presence dating back to the Russian period. Elliot studied the list from across the table. If Volkov has the custodian index, he has these locations too. He'll move on all 6. He will prioritize.
The baptismal record in Porvoo and the letters in Paris are the most dangerous to the Russian state because they establish the bloodline in documents that can be authenticated. He'll target those first. Then we need to reach Porvoo before he does. Katerina looked at Elliot, then at Riley. The old woman's face was still, composed, but Riley saw the calculation happening. The same calculation Henrik Rask must have made in his last days. How much to reveal? How much to withhold? How much trust to extend to two people whose entire lives had been shaped by other people's decisions about what they should and should not know? There is something else, Katerina said. Something that changes the nature of what you're facing. She reached into the document case and withdrew a folded printout. Not one of Henrik's papers, but something newer. A screenshot of a web page printed on standard copy paper. This was posted 2 hours before we left Parkveien. I found it on a monitoring alert I maintain through an anonymized service. Riley took the printout. It was an article from a fringe political blog, Russian language, hosted on a .ru domain, the kind of site that mixed legitimate opposition commentary with conspiracy theories and intelligence-planted narratives. The headline, translated in Katerina's handwriting in the margin, read, "Extremist monarchist network linked to Oslo murder. Western intelligence connection suspected." The article claimed that the death of Henrik Rask was connected to an underground monarchist organization with ties to Western intelligence services. It described Honest Russia, by name, as a radical exile network funded by foreign governments to destabilize the Russian Federation. It mentioned 2 unnamed Norwegian citizens who were being manipulated by the organization as part of a fabricated bloodline operation designed to create a false Romanov claimant. Riley read it twice. The prose was crude, but the structure was professional. Every sentence served a purpose. Connect Honest Russia to extremism. Connect the murder to conspiracy. Connect Riley and Elliot, unnamed but described, to manipulation and fraud. "This is the other half of the operation," Riley said. "The police pressure makes us look evasive. The media framing makes us look invented. By the time we surface to tell our story, the ground has already been poisoned."
Volkov's preferred weapon is doubt, Katerina said. He does not need people to believe a single lie. He needs people to stop believing anything. Elliot took the printout from Riley's hand and scanned it. "How fast does this kind of story spread?" "In Russia, it will be picked up by sympathetic outlets within hours. In Europe, it depends on whether legitimate journalists can be prompted to report on monarchist extremism as a growing security concern. That usually requires a diplomatic briefing or a well-placed leak to a security correspondent. Which Volkov can arrange. Which Volkov has almost certainly already arranged." Riley pressed her palms flat on the table, the way she'd seen Katerina do, anchoring herself to the surface, to the physical present, to the wood grain under her fingers. She thought about what she knew. A man named Colonel Sergei Volkov sat in Moscow and ran an operation called Quiet Crown. His objective was not to kill her, not yet, not necessarily, but to make her unusable, to sever every connection she had to credibility, safety, and institutional support, to ensure that by the time she understood what File 17 meant, no one would believe her. She thought about what Volkov didn't know. He didn't know where she was. He didn't know she had Henrik's letter, the organizational chart, the list of 6 fragments, or the photograph. He didn't know that she could read Russian well enough to parse his propaganda. He didn't know that she'd spent her career studying exactly this kind of operation, the layered pressure, the narrative shaping, the systematic destruction of credibility. Because it was what authoritarian states did to opposition figures, and she had briefed NATO-aligned governments on the pattern dozens of times. She'd just never been the target before. "If Quiet Crown is active," Riley said, "then File 17 is no longer a hidden archive." She looked at Elliot. He met her gaze, and she saw in his face the same cold clarity she felt. Not courage, not yet, but the recognition that the rules had changed, and there was no going back. "It's a battlefield," she said. Katerina nodded once. The rain continued against the windows. The forest stood dark and wet beyond the glass. Somewhere in Moscow, a man she had never met was working methodically to erase her before she could speak. Riley pulled the list of 6 fragments toward her and began to read it again. 2,000 kilometers southeast, in a 6th-floor office on Lubyanka Square, Colonel Sergei Antonovich Volkov turned a page. The office was spare. A desk of dark wood, clean except for 2 files, a secure telephone, and a ceramic mug of tea gone cold. Behind the desk, a window faced an inner courtyard. The glass was thick enough to muffle the sound of Moscow traffic. Volkov had never opened the window. Fresh air was not the point of having one. He read the morning's operational summary with the careful attention he gave to all documents, not scanning for headlines, but checking for gaps. What was reported? What was omitted? What language had been chosen, and what that choice revealed about the person writing? The summary confirmed. Henrik Rask, File 17 custodian, deceased. Method clean. No state signature recovered. Norwegian police had classified the death as suspicious and opened a formal investigation. 2 witnesses, one male, one female, both Norwegian nationals, had provided initial statements and were subsequently released. Both had since become unreachable. Volkov turned to the 2nd page. The custodian index, recovered from Rask's apartment by the contracted extraction team, had been delivered to a secure intermediary in Tallinn and was now in transit to Moscow via diplomatic bag. Preliminary analysis confirmed 6 primary evidence nodes across 4 countries. Detailed targeting recommendations would follow within 48 hours. He set the summary aside and opened the 2nd file. This one was thinner, but more carefully assembled. 2 photographs were clipped to the inside cover. A young woman with chestnut hair and sharp hazel eyes, photographed entering a glass-fronted office building in Oslo, and a man with dark blonde hair and a broad-shouldered build, photographed at what appeared to be a construction site, wearing a hard hat and a reflective vest. Riley Hunt. Elliot Harper. Volkov studied the photographs with the same detached attention he'd given the operational summary. He was not looking at faces. He was looking at problems. The woman was a political risk consultant, Yale-educated. Clients included Norwegian government ministries and NATO-adjacent organizations. She would understand, faster than most, what her bloodline represented in strategic terms. She would see the political architecture of the threat. She would try to shape the narrative. The man was a construction engineer with military service, former Norwegian Army officer, international mission experience. He would understand physical threat, tact, tactical movement, surveillance detection. He would be difficult to corner and dangerous to underestimate in any operational scenario involving proximity. Volkov closed the file. He picked up the secure telephone and dialed a 4-digit internal extension. Volkov, Connect me to the Nordic desk. A pause, a click, a voice. Petrov. The Oslo subjects have gone to ground. Surveillance lost contact after the Parkveien address. I want digital monitoring expanded to all known associates. Focus on the woman identified as Tara Morgan, communications coordinator, Munch Museum. She assisted one of the subjects during a surveillance evasion at her workplace. Her phone, email, and social media should be flagged for any anomalous contact, from unknown numbers or geographic regions inconsistent with her normal pattern. Understood. Second priority, media framing. The Chesnaya Rossiya article published this morning needs wider distribution. Coordinate with the Information Operations Group to ensure the monarchist extremist narrative reaches at least 2 Western European security correspondents by end of week. Use the standard attribution chain: academic source, think tank citation, then press inquiry. What about the Norwegian police investigation? Volkov considered. He reached for his tea, found it cold, and set it down. The investigation is useful as long as it creates pressure on the subjects without reaching conclusions that contradict our framing. Ensure our diplomatic liaison in Oslo raises the matter informally with PST contacts. Frame it as a counterintelligence concern, a possible foreign-backed monarchist network operating on Norwegian soil, connected to the museum death. Do not accuse, suggest. Let them draw their own conclusions. And the subjects themselves? They are a containment problem, not an elimination priority. I want them isolated, discredited, and separated from any institutional support before we move to direct acquisition of File 17 materials. If they surface publicly before the evidence is secured, they must already appear unreliable. And if they surface with evidence? Volkov's voice didn't change. The cadence remained even, the tone bureaucratic. Then we adjust the timeline. But evidence without credibility is noise. That is what we are building. A world in which no one can hear them clearly enough to act. He ended the call, replaced the handset, opened the file again, and looked at the 2 photographs. A young woman who understood power. A young man who understood danger. Together, they were more than a bloodline problem. They were a narrative, and narratives, once they took hold, were harder to kill than people. Volkov reached for his pen, uncapped it, and wrote a single line at the bottom of the operational summary. Subjects must not reach Porvoo. He closed both files, stacked them neatly, and placed them in the secure drawer. Then he stood, put on his overcoat, and left the office. The corridor was quiet. The building was always quiet. Quiet was the operating principle. In Oslo, it was raining. In the Norwegian forest, 2 people he had never met were reading a dead man's letter and learning, for the first time, the shape of the cage being built around them. Volkov walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. He had a briefing at the ministry in 40 minutes. The topic was counter-terrorism cooperation with Nordic partners. He adjusted his tie in the elevator's polished steel doors and thought, briefly, about the empty chair at the table of witnesses. Then the doors opened, and he stepped through. The safe-house kitchen smelled of wood smoke and instant coffee. Rain streaked the windows in thin lines, and the forest pressed close on every side, birch trunks pale as bone against the dark spruce beyond. Riley sat across from Katerina at the narrow table. Henrik's letter lay between them, its creases already soft from handling. Elliot stood by the window, arms folded, watching the gravel track that wound down through the trees to the road. "We need to talk to them," Riley said. Katerina set down her cup. "To whom?" Our parents. Riley caught herself. The people who raised us. Katerina's expression didn't shift, but her hand tightened around the cup's handle. That is extremely dangerous. If you contact them now, while Volkov's operation is active, you create a trail. Their phones, their homes, their movements, everything becomes a vector.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.